Okay, the first family. We looked last time at this genealogy, and I've sort of shortened it now. I went through the whole thing with you from Abraham and Sarah and all that. So now I've just focused really on Jacob, still making the headline Abraham, because Abraham is where it all starts. That's God choosing Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, actually Genesis chapter 11, the end of the chapter. And then even today, it's the children of Abraham who are still carrying on that flag. So we get to Jacob, and Jacob has 2 wives and 2 concubines. And the 2 wives are Rachel and Leah has all these kids, including Dinah, who's the only girl. And then Rachel has 2 children. Bilhah, who is Rachel's concubine, has 2 sons, and Zilpah, who is Leah's concubine, has 2 children as well. And I'm going to put just one more thing on here to connect them so that you know they're more through Leah and Rachel's influence than Jacob's influence. So we have all these children, and that's where we get the 12 tribes of Israel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Dinah's not included, of course. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And birth order is very important. Particularly in the scripture, it's very important. But Reuben is the firstborn. And because he's the firstborn, particularly in the nation of Israel, that brings a lot of responsibility, but it also brings a lot of opportunity. Both. And I'll show you that a little bit in the study. So Reuben comes first. Now, let's go to the book of Genesis, chapter 29, and just walk through this. And as we talk about this firstborn child, let me tell you a little bit about what psychology says through some empirical study, and there's been lots of research on it. But no matter how much the research is, every person's an individual, right? They don't have to fall into this category. Because they're firstborn doesn't mean it's going to work out for them, and it doesn't mean if it doesn't fit their personality that they're a failure, okay? But generally speaking, the firstborn is expected both by the parents and by society to be responsible. You need to be a good example for your brothers and sisters. They're watching you, they're learning. You got to watch what you're saying. You got to be careful what you're doing, and right? Did you tell your firstborns that? Or did you feel that way if you were the firstborn? So here's Reuben, and Reuben's got this tremendous responsibility. Now, understanding as these children are born, it's very fast. Are you in Genesis chapter 29? Look at how this takes place. And it tells us at the end of chapter 29, and Leah conceived and bare a son and called his name Reuben. For she said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. Remember the story? Leah was sort of the consolation prize. Jacob loved Rachel, and Jacob wanted to marry Rachel. He fell in love with Rachel from the get-go, and he loved Rachel from the beginning. She was the favorite. People talk about having favorite children. Well, Jacob had a favorite wife. And so, because he loved Rachel, and the Lord saw that, he closed Rachel's womb. She was the last to have children. All these babies being born, 10 children being born, and over here's Rachel, she can't have any kids. You know what that had to do to her psychologically. So Jacob marries Rachel only because he's tricked into it. And now she sees this. He loves Rachel. He wants to be with Rachel. He spends all his time with Rachel. He sleeps with Rachel. And he doesn't give Leah the time of day. He never wanted to marry her. And so she begins to pray and say, God, give me a baby. And don't let my sister have any. Both so then maybe my husband will love me. So Reuben is born, and Leah thinks this is going to be the answers to everything. I mean, he's going to love me now. And then immediately look at verse 33. There's at the end of the verse, there's Simeon. Verse 34, there's Levi. And then at the end of the verse, of the last verse, is Judah. So there's that birth. And it's probably, we don't know, but being that quickly, it's likely maybe 10 months, 11 months, 12 months between these, 13 months maybe. Not much more than that. So these boys, as they get older, say let's say Reuben is 5 and Judah is 1. Or Reuben is 6 and Judah is 1. When those boys grow up and they get to be adult age, you're not going to be able to tell the difference in their ages. I mean, it's going to be. So you can imagine what's going on here. But at first, Reuben is by himself. I don't think he ever got to enjoy that time. I think these boys were born so quickly. And of course, she's got a handmaid who's helping take care of these babies. So it wasn't like that. And Jacob's very rich, so it's not that, they're being born into poverty. But nonetheless, Reuben grows up with this responsibility because that's what's expected of the firstborn in most cases. Research shows that they want to be a leader. They feel responsible. They have a need to control. They want to be, the most driving thing for them in life is to be successful, and they're not willing to take many risks in order to do it. That's the typical firstborn. Now, what happens when, and here's where Reuben comes in, what happens when a person is the firstborn and they don't meet expectations? When they're not successful? When they don't take responsibility very well? Then see, you got the chance of a miserable life. So we go to Genesis chapter 49, and Jacob is on his deathbed. And while we're going, let's get Genesis 37 too, because this plays a very important part in Reuben's story. So if you get both of those. But let's go to Genesis 49 first. And in Genesis 49 verse 3, when Jacob's on his deathbed, he's doing his last will and testament, and the important part of this is the end of verse 1. It says, these things are going to befall you in the last days. So this is all prophecy as you go through here. What I want you to say what he said about Reuben. Reuben, thou art my firstborn. There it is. My might. The beginning of my strength. The excellency of dignity. The excellency of power. Man, if he stopped there, what do you got? You got success. Success. But then he goes on to say in verse 4, unstable as water thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, then defilest thou it. He went up to my couch. Now we know what happened in that. He bowed to some sexual desire here. When he gets older, we don't know how old, but when he gets older, he has a relationship, a sexual relationship. I don't know what you'd call her. Stepmom? What would you call her? I don't know. Step concubine? I don't know what you call her. But he had this relationship with Aunt Bilhah. I don't know who she is. She's not an aunt. She's not a sister. Just weird, right? So Reuben has this relationship, and Jacob never forgot it. He felt betrayed by that. And of course you would. You would. Regardless of how Jacob felt about Bilhah, there's no way to justify it. And because of that, Reuben lost the birthright. Jesus Christ is not known as the Lion of the tribe of Reuben, nor Simeon, nor Levi. There's the first three. He's known as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Judah gets that right. And we'll see a little later that something happens with Joseph as well. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So in Genesis 49 verse 3, an announcement is given against him that he's not going to excel because he's unstable as water. Think about water. And you folks, if you know the history of this area, particularly will understand it, because much of the northwest from here years ago was underwater until TVA came through and began building the dams, and the water was held back and now generates electricity for the whole area. They were able to take the water that was completely out of control and control it, and when it's controlled, it brings forth power. So Reuben, excellent in power and strength and dignity, but out of control. And the one thing that showed him out of control was this one event here. It just showed, Jacob, I can't trust you. But not all bad Reuben. Look at Genesis 34. I don't paint Reuben in such a picture, because if you're Reuben, and by that I mean not the firstborn, but if your life is such that you've made some mistakes in the past that are so egregious that nobody's ever going to forget them, you can be forgiven, but never forgotten. It just has that, that shock value. He had a relationship with his stepmom. And everybody knew it. I mean, it was in the Perry County News. I mean, it's everywhere. So this is all known. I mean, everybody knows it. Everybody in the family knows it, Brothers probably, on the side, how guys are. They probably got some jokes going on that are probably not very appropriate, just the way guys are. But if you've got something like that, and I'm not saying that egregious, that bad. I'm just saying if you've got something in your life, you say, man, I failed. I dropped out of school. I got fired from my job. I disappointed my parents. I got kicked out of the military. You got something in your life that you just go back and go, man, I got caught cheating on a test. Well, if that's the case, there's hope. Because Reuben didn't become a failure because of that one incident. It may have defined him as far as us studying the Bible, but Reuben had a lot of great characteristics. And in 37, they have taken Joseph and put him down in a pit, and they're trying to decide what to do with him. They eventually, of course, sell him into slavery. But there's even a movement among the brothers, we don't know really who, but there's a movement among the brothers to kill him. We're talking about these guys. We're talking about these guys. All these guys either want him dead or gone because they're jealous, it's envious. I mean, he's way down here on the totem pole as far as birth order goes. The 11th, and he's telling us in Genesis 37, well, I saw you bowing down to me. And they went, what? What are you talking about? 21, and Reuben heard it. And he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand on him. Look, God gives you some insight to his thinking, that he might rid him out of their hands to deliver him to his father again. Reuben was not in all of this of selling him into slavery. Reuben's trying to take that position of leadership and say, hey guys, this isn't right. Now he said put him in the pit, but the whole reason that Reuben said put him in the pit is that he might get him away from their hands lest they kill him. So as the story goes on, they cast him in the pit. There's no water. Some Ishmaelites come along. Verse 26, interestingly enough, Judah said, let's sell him. Judah remind you of anybody who sells somebody else? You know who Judah is in the New Testament? Judas. What profit is we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Let us sell him to the merchants. Verse 29, now Reuben's gone. I don't know where. Maybe he's trying to make some arrangements to get this done, some way to get transportation, to get him out and get him away from the brothers. Maybe he's trying to rally somebody to help him And it says in verse 29, and Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. See, Reuben's got some good character. So don't just cast him off and say, hey man, that's the guy who slept with his mother-in-law. This is the guy who just did something wrong, and let's cast him off forever. No, Reuben's got some stuff. And in Genesis 49, Jacob even admits that. You're my firstborn. You're my dignity. You're my power. You are excellent, but you're just as unstable as water. And that continues to hold true. Look at Genesis 42. Genesis 42. Now, at this point, Joseph is in his heyday. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. He's collected all the food and famine. He's made a prince in Israel. And the brothers have now gone down. Now, they don't know Joseph, who Joseph is. He's talking Egyptian to them. He's picked up the language. He can understand them. They can't understand him. And he asks them their history and says, where are you guys from? And they say, well, we've got a father, and one of us is dead, and the other's young and back with a dad. Is your dad still alive? Is he still well? Now, this is the first time Joseph heard anything since he was in that pit. And that's at least 14 years ago, and likely 20 or 25 years ago that this has happened. Maybe 13 years ago if we take, well, he was 17 when that happened, and now he's 30 if he's the same age as Christ when he began to rule. So it's been at least a decade, let's say that. And that time has happened now that he's hearing for the first time that his dad's still alive, and his dad doesn't know what happened to him. His dad thinks he's dead. So he says, well, y'all are a bunch of liars, a bunch of cheaters. And they were. Some of the things he says about them, he knows who they are. He says, you're spies. You come down here just to spy out the land to see what you can get. And they said, no, we're spies. And he said, okay, if you're not spies, go back and get your younger brother, my full-blooded brother. Don't leave that out. Because you know what? Joseph doesn't trust these guys. If I'm Joseph, I'm thinking they're going to do the same thing to Benjamin first chance they get. Because that's my mama's line. And he's the only one left, at least in their mind. And if they get rid of him, that's what Joseph's thinking. So he said, you go get Benjamin, bring him down here. Because I'm going to protect him. So they go away, and he keeps one of them there, bound. And the one he keeps is Simeon. Look at verse 24. Simeon is bound. Who's Simeon? His little brother. His Joseph's big brother. The second born. I've always wondered about that. Why did he choose Simeon? You ever wondered about that? I'm probably the only one who thinks that way. Why Simeon? If you're a little detective in that, you're beginning to go, well, why did Joseph? He could have chosen any of the ones. He could have chosen Reuben. He didn't. He knew Reuben tried to save his life. Reuben probably told him, hey, I'm just getting you in this pit. I'm going to figure something out. Don't despair. It's going to be okay. I'm going to go take care of this. I promise I'll be back. So he didn't choose Reuben. Of course, if he had chosen Reuben, he might have been having fellowship with him and say, hey man, everything's good, it's good. No, he chose Simeon. You know what I think he chose Simeon? This could be completely wrong, the Bible doesn't say. But I'm trying to get into his head and think like he thinks. I think that's the instigator right there. I think that's the one. It's all speculation, but I think that's the one who led the charge to kill him. And he's wanting to protect Benjamin, right? So he says, I've got to get him away from him. That's the murderer. That's the killer. And we'll see next time with Simeon and Levi. They are killers. They are killers. Read Genesis 34 lately? They're killers. So, okay, we're going to keep Simeon. So they go back and get out of the land. And so now they've got to go back. They're out of food. And he says, well, they say, well, Dad, the only way we can go back is if we take Benjamin with us. Oh, no, you're not taking Benjamin. Remember what he said about this? I told you last week. Jacob named him Benjamin because he's the son of my right hand. He's the only one he's got left. As far as he knows, the only one he's got left of Rachel. No, there's no way you're taking that boy. So Reuben steps up. See this? Verse 37. And Reuben spake unto his father, saying, Slay my 2 sons, bring me not to thee. Deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him to thee again. That's cool, isn't it? If I don't bring him back, Dad, then you kill my 2 sons. Now, is there some hyperbole in that? Probably, because that's Jacob's grandsons. And you're not going to kill your grandsons, are you? Unless you're Athaliah over there in Kings, and she killed them all. She killed all her grandkids. One escaped. That's a great story. Weird story. A woman who killed all her grandkids. But nonetheless, just to get you hungry to read more Bible, what's Jacob say when he says that? You see the next verse? My sons are not going with you. There's no way my sons are going with you. Why did he say that? This has already happened. Now, Jacob's the type of personality that he doesn't speak out immediately when things happen. When Dinah's raped in Genesis chapter 34, and they end up killing all those people of Shechem, Jacob doesn't open his mouth. So he's not quick to respond. And when this happened, he doesn't say anything about this until he's on his deathbed. But right here, he says, I don't trust you. I'm not sending Benjamin with you. Well, later, Judah steps up. Judah says the same thing. If I don't bring him back, then I'll be a dead man. I'll give up my life for his life. And Jacob says, he can go with you. There's something about this guy you can count on. Something about this guy let you down. And he continually lets you down. I mean, turn to Deuteronomy 33 and we'll finish up here. I know I'm going a little long with this story, but it's so interesting and something that you usually will probably just study once in your life, the 12 tribes of Israel. But you come to Deuteronomy chapter 33, and here is Moses, and he's on his deathbed, even though he's not old and he's not sick. He's strong at 120 years old, and he could take them into the promised land, and he could lead them into battle and lead them into war and do just what Joshua does, but he struck that rock. And the Lord said, you're not going in, you can just watch it from here. So Deuteronomy 33, he's given his last will and testament. In Deuteronomy chapter 34, he's going to die and God's going to bury him. And in Deuteronomy 33, he begins giving his last testament. He says something about the tribes. And in verse number 4, he says, let Reuben live and not die, and let not his men be few. That's it. That's all he says. There's no more. He moves on to the other tribes from there. So he's saying, let Reuben grow. And they do. They become one of the largest tribes in Israel when you look at the census. They start out strong in Numbers, early Numbers, the book of Numbers, and they stay strong at the end of the book of Numbers. Despite that whole group in the first book of Numbers dying in the wilderness, they are still strong after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. So they've been in the wilderness having babies. And they've just expanded and grown. And that's what he says to them. Now, when it comes to the promised land, one of the things they say in the book of Numbers is they get all this land on this side of Jordan. And they say, we sure would like to keep this land. It's good. Manasseh, Gad, half the tribe of Manasseh. They say, we'd like to have all this land on this side of Jordan, and you guys go take the rest. We forfeit our property over there. You guys are going to get more property because we're not going to go in and take ours. We would like to have this place because it's great for cattle. And we're all cowboys. And Moses at first responds and says, no, you can't do that, because remember what the others did when they said we can't take the promised land and we had to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. You're not going to do that again. And they said, no, you misunderstand our reasoning here. We're going to build houses for our families and fences for our cows, and then all the men of age who can go to war will go and fight, and we will fight and stay till the fight is over. We would just like to have this land. And the Lord says, okay. And Moses says that famous verse, and if you don't, be sure your sin will find you out. So Reuben, again, shows character. What do? They get those houses built, they get all the fences for their cattle, and then when it's time to cross over Jordan, they all cross. Just the men, the ladies, and the children stay behind. But all the men of war go in, and they fight from Jericho all the way to the last battle is fought. And people died. But they were there with their brothers side by side, fighting the whole way. What are they fighting for? Somebody else's property. It's easy enough to fight for your own property, right? Well, what if your property is secure? It takes character to go in and fight. And he does. And then when it's all done, they go back over the River Jordan and there they stay. But there's a problem with that. Problem. See, they're short-sighted. And that's the problem with Reuben, the whole story. He's just unstable as water. Courageous. Wants to do the right thing. But in the end, what happens? Well, when the Assyrians come to carry off the northern tribes, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians get Judah. And people get confused about that because there's two carrying aways, right? There's a carrying away of the northern tribe many years before the carrying away of the southern tribe. The one that gets the most notice is Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians, because that's Daniel and all of that. But don't forget, before that happened, Israel has already been carried away by the Assyrians. And guess who got caught first? Because they're on the other side of Jordan. And he was just short-sighted. And he took the land on that side of the river, just short of the promised land. How could you ever really understand that? And I think some Christians, it pictures Christians who just get caught up in this world and this side. Say, man, I want everything now. Give it all to me now. Give it all to me now. And so short-sighted to see, well, if you'll just invest a little on the other side, man, what? Even Jesus said, right? Lay up treasures in heaven where moth cannot eat them and thieves can't destroy and kill or steal it. Yeah, that's Reuben. But let's end on a positive note. Let's go to 1 Chronicles. And the first thing I want you to see is verse 1, because this is Reuben. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel. See, it's not forgotten. He's the firstborn. Now we're talking about his sons generations later. The sons of Reuben. Now it gives you this little caveat, and it says, for he was the firstborn, for as much as he defiled his father's bed. Never forgot it, right? His birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel. And the genealogy is not to be reckoned after the birthright. But Judah prevailed above his brethren, and of him came the chief ruler. But the birthright was Joseph's. So that explains to us the reason why Jesus Christ came from Judah. He prevailed above his brethren, and I'll show you why he prevailed above his brethren in an incident that happens in Genesis where God says, that's my man, my son's going to come from that tribe. But the birthright went to Joseph. Why did the birthright go to Joseph? Because he was the firstborn of the beloved Rachel. Despite all these kids being born, When Joseph was born, Jacob says, "That's my boy." Right there. So that answers the question as to why is there no tribe of Joseph? When you're reading all the tribes, tribe of Reuben, tribe of Simeon, tribe of Levi, tribe of Judah, tribe of Issachar, tribe of Zebulun, tribe of Dinah, tribe of Gad, yep, tribe of Asher, yep, tribe of Dan, tribe of, I've got Asher up here, one of those should be Naphtali. Dan and Asher, Gad and Naphtali, and then Joseph and Benjamin, but there's a tribe of Benjamin. There's no tribe of Joseph anywhere. No tribe of Joseph. And Levi didn't get anything, right? He was the priestly tribe. So we got, okay, let's count this up. 1, 2, we can skip him. 3, 4, 5, 6, Naphtali, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, there's 12 tribes of Israel. Where's the other two? Do you know who they are? Joseph's sons, who were? Manasseh and Ephraim. So Joseph got the double blessing that goes with the birthright because his grandchildren got the same amount of inheritance as the sons did. See, these guys' sons all had to split it. Jacob's grandsons, Joseph, got in the first line. So that explains that. Now it goes on to say, you can read it. It goes on to say, Reuben's sons, they were fighters. Courage. There it comes again. Courage, courage, courage. So my point is, in this study about Reuben, even if you've had a failure in your life that sort of has marked you as a failure, you don't have to live in that. People may still bring it up. They're bringing it up in 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 1. That happened way back in Genesis. But it's just a mark that you can't get past. But it doesn't mean you have to quit. Reuben never quit. He tried to help Joseph. He helped take the promised land. And here in 1 Chronicles, he left a legacy that they are still fighting, no matter what. So, in the end, I would argue, Reuben was a success.